Whenever you're ready, it's on. 1 2 1 2. 212. You're welcome. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Reverend Connie Simon, and we are glad that you're here with us, either in person or virtually. Our urban community welcomes all with love, supports learning and spiritual growth, serves our wider community, and works for justice, equity, and inclusion. If you'd like to know more about our congregation or our programming here at First Church, please send us an email at member-care@firstuu.com. And now we will begin our service as we do every week by lighting our chalice, the chosen symbol of our faith. We do so this morning with these words of Kendall Gibbons. Perhaps. Maybe I have a match. Okay. We do so with these words of Kendall Gibbons. Out of a community of diverse heritage and belief, we come together to share our hope and to create good in the world. The prophets of all traditions and times have taught that we are called to mercy, generosity, and mutual care, and that to be great is to serve. We know that there can be no enduring happiness for humanity so long as suffering and want go unrelieved. Until all may be sheltered, none of us is truly at home. May the power of our various faiths sustain us in this work, that we may be the hands of holy creativity and justice, and together build a better world. Please join us now in singing our vision song. The words will appear on your screen. We are a liberal religious haven, welcoming wonder and spiritually free. We're sustained by a loving tradition, rooted and inspired by the future we see. Always seeking and working for justice, gently transforming lives through deeds great and small. Young and old, sharing meaning and mission, joyfully offer our vision to all.
Grace for President. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell couldn't believe her eyes. Where are the girls? That's a very good question, said Mrs. Barrington. The truth is, our country has never had a woman president. No girl president ever? Grace asked. No, I'm afraid not, said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat at her desk and stewed. No girls. Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. Yes, Grace? I've been thinking it over, and I'd like to be president. Several students in her class laughed. Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace, said Mrs. Barrington. In fact, we can have our own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary. The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. Would anyone else like to run for president? Mrs. Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, thought Grace. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. In the name of democracy, I've invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate. Grace's heart sank. Thomas was a school spelling bee champion. His experiments always took a blue ribbon at the science fair, and he was the captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be so easy after all, Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except for Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. I'm Texas, said Anthony. I'm New Hampshire, said Rose. I'm Michigan, said Robbie. What does the number 17 mean? Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. That number is determined by how many people live in their state, said Mrs. Barrington. Each of you will be a representative for your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes, Mr. Waller explained. On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election. Why 270? Asked Rose. That's more than half of all the electoral votes, Mr. Waller said. Becoming president really wasn't going to be so easy, Grace thought. Grace came up with a campaign slogan, "Make history, vote Grace Campbell for president." Thomas came up with his own election campaign slogan, "Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job." Grace listened to what issues were important to the students, and she made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school, no bullies. A cleaner school, no littering. Better hot lunches. No more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish stick tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. Each week, the teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken. Voters were making their choices. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out free cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He had cleverly calculated that the boys held slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment. And after school, he played soccer. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad. She organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special Election Day assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellowhammer State of Alabama cast its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. Fletcher said, "The last frontier state of Alaska cast its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb." Hannah called out, "The Grand Canyon state of Arizona cast its 10 electoral votes for Grace Campbell." And so it went. State after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of the totals. The voting demonstration was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. "The Badger State of Wisconsin cast its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell." Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes. She had 267. There was only one state still unaccounted for: Wyoming. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's handmade flag. And Sam didn't say a word. "What are you waiting for?" Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The Equality State of Wyoming cast its 3 electoral votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. "Why did you do it?" she asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. "Because," he said, "I thought you were the best person for the job." The following week, the students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their Career Day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. "My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States." This time, everyone believed that she would.
Amazing grace. Isn't it amazing what the power of belief can do? What true equity and equality can look like? This morning, as we contemplate our joys and our sorrows, let's hold all of those joys and those hopes and those dreams of little girls everywhere like Grace, of young people everywhere like Grace. Let's lift up their desires and their hopes that they can truly transform our world. They're our future. Take a moment to think of someone young that you know, maybe someone young who's sitting right in the sanctuary, and think of all the potential they have and all that they can bring to this planet in the future. No pressure. We have some other joys to celebrate this week. Bev and Bill Baker are happy to report that their daughter Leslie is improving, and by the end of this week should be in rehab at Drake, if all goes well. We know all will. And still, we have a number of sorrows. We mourn the passing of member Pete Rizzo, longtime member of the congregation. Our hearts go out to his family. Our hearts are filled with love and support and good wishes for Alan Atkinson and his family, and for Nick Payne and his family, and for others as they continue to grieve and to cope with illness and with loss. In our wider world, we think of those in Haiti, who are the victims of yet another earthquake, and then felt the impact of the hurricane that's making its way up the Atlantic coast. We still have forest fires raging. We have more people than ever hospitalized with COVID. The number of cases in our community is growing rapidly. Hamilton County is now in the most severe rating area. For all of those who are sick, all of those who are supporting someone who is sick, for those who now face economic uncertainty, who may not have access to health care, our hearts are full of love. And so this morning, we drop a stone for all of our sorrows and our hope that the water will ease those sorrows and soothe our wounded hearts. We drop another stone for our joys, that the power of love may amplify our joy and spread it around the world. We drop one last stone for those whose joys and sorrows and life conditions are unknown to us. We often think of those we're connected to, those we see every day, our friends, our co-workers, our neighbors. But what about our neighbors around the world that we don't know? What about our neighbors down the hall that we don't know? Our love and our support should be open to all, not just those we know. So, for those we don't know, we drop another stone in our water, that their sorrows may be soothed and that their joys may be amplified. And I ask you to join me in looking at our beautiful flowers this morning, which are a present to the congregation from Gary and Deneen, and full of love for all of us. We'll now pause for a moment of silent meditation, reflection, or prayer, after which we will sing Spirit of Life, and the words will appear on the screen. Every month at First Church, we recognize a particular agency or organization in the area that is doing the work of justice. And we give our plate collections to that organization to support their work. For the month of August, our Share the Plate beneficiary is working in neighborhoods. Since 1978, Working in Neighborhoods, or WIN, has developed sustainable communities by empowering Cincinnati neighbors to build equity for themselves and their families, and to develop win-win goals for their neighborhoods. WIN's strategy is organic, connecting shared neighborhood needs with broader economic resources. They support people of all faiths and all cultures in their pursuit of justice. WIN leverages partnerships with the banking community and local, state, and federal government resources to build support for home ownership, especially for African American families who face eviction or foreclosure. WIN builds neighborhood engagement through youth enrichment and summer camps, increasing access to healthy food, safe traffic patterns, internet access, and secure housing units for seniors and other low-income tenants. You can learn more information about the work that they do by visiting their website, wincincy.org. To contribute to WIN or to support the work of First Unitarian Church, you may do by texting the word GIVE to 513-717-7373. If you have access to our Breeze member system, you may click Give Now. You can also donate online at our website, firstuu.com. In each of these instances, you'll be asked where you'd like to direct your gift. If you'd like it to go to WIN, please select Share the Plate for August. You may also mail a check to 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45219. Just be sure to put WIN in the memo line. If this is your first time visiting us, or watching with us, we invite you to let the virtual plate pass you by. Our offering will now be gratefully received. Our reading this morning is an excerpt from Speak Truth to Power by the American Friends Service Committee. Is there a method for dealing with conflict which does not involve us in the betrayal of our own beliefs, either through acquiescence to our opponent's will or through resorting to evil means to resist him? Is there a way to meet that which threatens us without relying on our ability to cause pain to the human being who embodies the threat? We believe there is a way, and that it lies in the attempt to give practical demonstration to the effectiveness of love in human relations. Our truth is an ancient one, that love endures and overcomes, that hatred destroys, that what is obtained by love is retained, but what is obtained by hatred proves a burden. This truth is ultimately a religious perception, a belief that stands outside of history. Leadership at a new and deeper level is required. Leadership that calls us to a new and revolutionary commitment to practice love in every area of life. Such commitment will demand a high price, but we believe that those who would lead must be ready to pay it. Great goals are always costly. Paying this price is the most relevant political and spiritual act of our day. Come to the edge. We might fall. Come to the edge. It's too high. Come to the edge. And they came, and he pushed, and they flew. A simple little poem by Christopher Loeb. But there's a lot packed in those few lines. We might fall. It's too high. Yes, it can be scary at the edge. It can make us feel fearful and afraid. You know, fear, that sinking feeling we get when we think something bad is going to happen, when we perceive danger. Fear makes us sweat, makes our heart race, and makes our stomachs turn. Fear can give us goosebumps or make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Anyone who's ever been afraid knows that fear is real. As much as we don't like it, fear is a natural human emotion. And whether they admit it or not, everyone is afraid sometimes. Everyone is afraid of something. I've given this some thought. It seems to me that our fears fall into three categories. There's fear of imaginary things, like monsters under the bed, or the boogeyman in the closet, or the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil was something that I was terrified of as a kid. It's a creature that supposedly roamed the pine barrens of New Jersey for, the story's like 300 years old. And according to my brother, it occasionally traveled to Oxford, Pennsylvania in the late 60s to eat 5-year-old girls. Sometimes our fears are of very specific things, like needles, or dentists, or flying. These fears are of very real things, like snakes, mice, and hairy centipedes. Sometimes our fears are fears of conditions, fear of death, fear of chaos, fear of change, or simply fear of the unknown. It's okay to have fears, and it's okay to be afraid. If it wasn't okay, we wouldn't have that emotion as human beings. So it must be natural, and it must be okay. The issue is how you react to your fears. The person with a fear of flying can take the train or a bus or drive. Or maybe take a sedative before flying or going to the dentist. It's inconvenient, but it's possible to avoid that thing you fear and still have a relatively normal life. But other times your fear can paralyze you. I grew up out in the country in a big old drafty house surrounded by trees. And for some reason, hairy centipedes like to wait until just after I went to bed, and then they would position themselves on the ceiling in the corner of my bedroom, just right close to the door. I swear I must have had centipede radar then, because I could just wake up even from a dead sleep if I so much as sensed their presence. I'd scream and then try to sneak out of the room so the centipede wouldn't get me. And then I couldn't move, but it was like, I gotta get out. It was this dance, because I certainly didn't want to disturb it so that it would move, and then I'd have to see all those legs doing what they do. I'd park myself in my parents' room or in my brother's room, despite the fact that he said the Jersey Devil sent the centipedes. And I would demand that someone go remove it. And I wouldn't go back to my room until I had proof that it was gone. And I wasn't much better with my fear of snakes either. One day I was outside in the backyard of my house in Colorado when I saw a snake. I promptly went inside and closed the door and never went in the backyard again. For the rest of the time I owned the house. I didn't have a dog then. And mice, I saw 2 in my house in West Philly. I moved. Fear can be paralyzing. And I don't mean to make light of it, because it's real. My niece and nephew saw their strong, capable Aunt Connie reduced to tears at the sight of these little mice. I refused to be alone in my own home and spent nights at each of their houses until I found a new place to live. I know that this is an irrational fear and that it rises to the level of a phobia. It does affect my life in negative ways. When we live in fear, we isolate ourselves from our community and from the rest of the world. When we live in fear, we're really not living at all. Many of us are living in fear today. Not necessarily fear of snakes or mice or fear of flying or the dentist. Perhaps fear of the coronavirus, fear of war, fear of climate change and what it means to us, fear of our political situation, fear of change in this congregation. These are all legitimate fears, and I share many of them with you. Some of us, though, are afraid of something much deeper. Fear of ourselves. Fear of our own power. This shows up in our lives in a few ways. It shows up when we hold ourselves back from doing or saying something. Let's say you're at a poetry slam with your friend. When you get called up to the mic to perform, you're too afraid. Your friend gets up, performs your poem, and gets rave reviews. How would you have felt if you'd been able to speak up? Or you get the flash of an idea, but either ignore it or talk yourself out of it. Later, you realize you lost out. An opportunity passed you by, and you're left with nothing but regret, wondering, why didn't I do that thing? In that moment, we didn't recognize our own talents or give ourselves enough credit for our abilities. Sometimes we're afraid of stepping up, rising up, or acting out for what's important, for what we believe in. We let fear get in our way and keep us from achieving our greatest potential or from creating true transformation in our society or in our world. We're afraid of rocking the boat. We're afraid of not getting it right. We're afraid people will laugh at us. We're afraid that people will be mad at us, or that we'll be rejected, or that we'll be ostracized, or we'll lose respect in our community. So we sit. In our minds, we think we're safe. We think we're staying in our comfort zone. What we're really doing is playing small, as the saying goes. It's nothing to be ashamed of. At one point or another, we've all done it. But it's only a short hop from playing small to not playing at all, to becoming stagnant, to becoming stuck. Our Unitarian ancestor Elizabeth Cady Stanton said, "The moment we begin to fear the opinions of others and hesitate to tell the truth that is in us, and from motives of policy are silent when we should speak, the divine floods of light and life no longer flow into our souls." Are you afraid of using your own power? Are you afraid of hearing yourself roar? Are you afraid of what you could do? Marianne Williamson says our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Everybody is scared of something. But fear doesn't have to stop us, as blogger Lisa Burgess writes. Being afraid doesn't mean we have to be quiet or sit down or do nothing. Scared doesn't mean don't. Scared doesn't mean weak. Scared doesn't mean stop. Scared just means human. Today, many of us are at that crossroads, at that point of, I'm scared, this virus isn't ending, the world's not getting better, my situation personally may be jeopardized or may be at risk, but we don't know what to do. We are afraid. It's natural. It's human. But my suggestion, my hope for you, my wish for you, is that you will be able to step up into the light, to face that fear, and to claim your own power for your own personal growth. Do that thing that you've been afraid to do. Now, we're in a limited time right now, so if you're something new, that thing you want to do is move to a new city, maybe that's not going to happen right now. But if there's something else that you've wanted to do, like going back to school, taking a class, having a critical conversation with someone, addressing a long-standing conflict, starting a new career, whatever that thing is, this is the time to do it. Claiming your power for social justice, getting involved with an issue that moves you. These are just a few things that you can do. You can write letters to the editor. You can call people. You can encourage others to take action. You can do something as small as starting to recycle in your own home. Do the thing that scares you. Someone once asked Rosa Parks if she was scared when she refused to give up her seat on that bus in Montgomery. And she said, yes. I was frightened, but I figured we needed help to get us more jobs and better education. A simple act. An act of which she was definitely afraid, and still one that she did. Now, I've been talking about personal power, and by that I mean your inner wisdom, that combination of faith and determination and will that exists within each of us. But we also hear that expression, speak truth to power, a lot these days. What kind of power is that, and how do you overcome that fear? I'll admit, I didn't know the origin of the phrase, speak truth to power, until 5 years ago. I assumed that it had come out of the civil rights era, but didn't really know more. It was also the title of a book by human rights activist Carrie Kennedy Cuomo, written back in 2003. And as you heard in the reading earlier, it's the title of a 1955 anti-violence, anti-war publication by the American Friends Service Committee, which says the phrase comes from a charge to 18th century Friends. So it's much, much older than I originally thought. But what does it mean? The accompanying curriculum for the Kennedy book addresses this by wondering, does it mean to speak truth to those in power, or does it mean that speaking truth creates power? That question applies to the original Quaker expression, along with this one. How does one even define power? Is it power as in the government? Power as in those who have the ability to oppress others? Surely they weren't referring to the kind of personal power that I've been talking about. Well, the Quakers spoke to power in three forms. To those who hold high places in our national life and bear the terrible responsibility of making decisions for war or peace. Power lies in the American people, who are the final reservoir of power in this country and whose values and expectations set the limits for those who exercise authority. And then there is the idea of power itself, just raw power and its impact on 20th century life. So yes, speaking truth to power today would include speaking to our government and to those who hold economic and social authority over us. It would also apply to our membership here in this congregation, to speaking out to the leaders of this congregation when you have thoughts and opinions. It would also include speaking to the power that we hold as a collective society and to the free will and inner power of each individual. Speaking truth to power is as much about speaking out in public as it is about marching and donating to causes and speaking to other folks. Power is in all of those things. But what is this truth that we speak? Our truth, the friend said, is an ancient one, that love endures and overcomes, that hatred destroys, that what is obtained by love is retained, but what is obtained by hatred proves a burden. This truth is ultimately a religious perception, a belief that stands outside of history. Thus, speaking truth to power means using love to stamp out the inequities that exist in society at all levels. Martin Luther King Jr. saw a connection between love and power. He said, "What is needed is a realization that power without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. Justice at its best is love correcting everything that stands against love." Speaking truth to power, then, according to commentator Tavis Smiley, means comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. None of us has a monopoly on the truth. There is the truth, and there is the way to the truth. We must be humble enough to accept that we only know the truth that we know at any given point on our life's journey. But that truth that we do know, we must speak it. We must have the courage to say what we see. Speaking truth to power means the ability to lead without fear, because, as Paul Porter said, very few actually have the courage to speak the truth. We need that inner strength and that inner power that we spoke about earlier, and we need to overcome our fear of using it. Perhaps Chicago attorney and law professor Judith Sherwin said it best. The trick about speaking truth to power is to do it from your inner conviction of moral truth and not for a desire for approbation. And not to be deterred by condemnation either, and to let your sense of the rightness of things overcome the fear of not speaking. We all have the obligation to speak truth to power in our lives, to forces great and small, to defend the powerless, to stand for justice, and to recognize the situations in which we are required to do so. These are anxious times, my friends. I don't have to list all the things. You know what's going on out there. It's hard and it's scary. And I ask myself, how is this possible that we find ourselves in this place? Why is this happening? Well, we know there are all kinds of reasons why this is happening. Ideological, philosophical, political difference. But at the root of it all, I think, is fear. Fear of losing power. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being left out. Fear of becoming irrelevant. And it's worse for those who lash out when those who lash out in fear also have the most power. That's when it's the worst. I understand that their fear is real, but we see it manifested in our society, in our government, often in our own communities in ways that are harmful and hurtful. It's not healthy for any of us. And as we see in the news every day, it can be deadly for us. I saw a Facebook post from someone who said they were so afraid of all the bad stuff, all the COVID stuff, all just tired of it. They only wanted to see positive things. And while I totally understand their feeling, I couldn't help but think, sure, we could just turn our heads, pretend these things aren't happening, and go back to our cat pictures on social media. I really wish we could, but we can't. It just doesn't square with our principles as Unitarian Universalists. It doesn't square with our role as human beings in an interconnected web of existence. We speak up for what's right. We say the hard things, and we do what we can to make things better. I know it's scary. We don't all have to be on the front lines of virus work. We don't all have to be on the front lines of the justice work. We don't all have to be engaged every minute of every day in a great cause. But we can't ignore these things either. Maybe today we can all set aside our own fear and just do one thing somewhere today that would make things better in our world. Let's be Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena who keeps trying even though he comes up short again and again, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Every single one of us has the ability to speak truth to power because we all have the ability to love. Everyone's scared of something. But let's not allow that fear to keep us from making change and from doing what's right. Let's not allow it to keep us from speaking truth to power. I leave you with these words of Rabindranath Tagore. Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me overcome my fears so that I can come to the edge and fly. May it be so. Please join us now in singing our closing hymn. The words appear on the screen. This is the fire of commitment.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Let us extinguish our chalice by reciting together the words that appear on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. For closing words, I want to share with you something written by my colleague, Reverend Wayne Arneson. He calls it, "Take courage, friends." Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Go in peace. As we transition into our world of service, I'd like to share with you a few announcements. We are continuing to monitor the Delta variant and our reopening situation. For the time being, RSVPs are required for service. Face masks are required in the building. There is no child care, religious education, or youth groups meeting in person. And all of our services will continue to be available on YouTube, whether they are here in the sanctuary or not. Those of you who are part of the community have been participating in a reopening survey, and we'll share the results of that survey next week during the announcements portion of the service. Also, this week is the beginning of the 4th annual Cincinnati Festival of Faiths, Compassion Through Action. This week's theme is We Are In It Together. If you are interested in participating in this virtual event, you can get more information about it at equation.org. That's EQUASION.org. If you are interested in seeing meditations and presentations from several different faith groups, please join in. This is a good program, an opportunity for you to do that. I will highlight that I'll be doing a Unitarian Universalist meditation on Wednesday at noon. Several of you have asked about the celebration of life for John Paul Newman that happened last week. It is still posted on our YouTube page. If you would like the link to view that, please let me know and we can get that to you. You can send that request to member-care@firstuu.com. Thank you.